All right, and we are live. So we were just about to start the banter back and forth, catching up, and then I figured it'd be good to kind of do it on air. I was just telling Trey that my wife does not like my clothes back here. She's like, "Can you tilt the camera?" I'm like, "Oh my God, they're gonna know that I have Splenda and that I have my laundry back here." Somebody's gonna wise up and figure out they can rob me for my clothes and my Splenda.
Okay, so
I'm in Toronto. Yep.
And you're working there long term then?
Yeah, well, short, long term. Probably a few. We were thinking a few years, but actually, I'm really liking it a lot, and so it might be
really
longer than that. Yeah, I like Toronto as a city quite a bit.
Really, and it's cold though.
I grew up in New Hampshire, so I'm okay with it. My wife doesn't like it, which is why she's in LA right now.
It's hard to imagine somebody who's native to California enjoying a place like Toronto, but I guess since you're from the East anyway, so it's okay.
Yeah, we're from the East, but we were in California for 20 years. We still have the place there, and it's a convenient hub for our kids. So if we do sell, it won't be for a few years. The kids are still both my boys are still in college in California, and my daughter's working in Atlanta. So she graduated. We have two graduating in a year and a half from now.
Okay.
And I think we would have been more open to a move like this before, except for that the kids, you don't want to move them around, and that was it's a little bit of flexibility we have right now before they start having kids, and then we're going to want to probably be located someplace. Like I don't want to go overseas or anything like that if they're going to be here having families and whatnot. So
yeah, well, that's great. So do you like Toronto because why? Is it cosmopolitan? I mean,
I could have done worse for cities in that I like diversity. I like diversity in my food. I like diversity in the people. I like the layout of Toronto is very nice. The public transit is fantastic. I don't have a car here, so I'm all on buses, streetcars, and subways, and it is actually fantastic. You never see I never see a piece of trash on any public transit. Everything just looks like it just popped out of the cleaners the day before. Like, it is a really clean city in terms of that. But on the other hand, what I like is there's tons of graffiti. There's tons of mural work. It's a really artistic city. Like when I take the streetcar in, every building has a mural, or every building has some graffiti tucked away, and really good stuff. And I love that. Like, it's just got a very creative quality to it. I like it a lot.
So you're an urban cosmopolitan type of guy at heart then?
Well, I have never done it before, so I'm actually enjoying this. But
oh, really? So
when I'm in LA, I'm about 200 yards from the Angeles National Forest, or 300 yards away. I can see downtown LA from my driveway, but I'm up. I have deer in my yard. I have bears breaking through fences. So,
well, that's interesting.
And my wife and I have never lived in a city. We live in LA, but we're 20 minutes from Chinatown or something. I'm probably 10 miles from downtown. So I'm not really in the city.
Okay. I guess another key factor is the fact that you don't have kids in a house, because I think I would like that too, probably. But if I had kids, I would rather be a little more suburban, I think.
Yeah. Well, actually, Toronto, I'm in a suburb of Toronto, so I'm about 30 minutes from work, but I'm in Etobicoke, which is like the Lake Ontario is Lake Ontario is right there, and and I'm actually kind of off to the side of Toronto, so I travel into the city by streetcar. I'd rather be in the city though. So if it was actually incredibly difficult getting here, because getting an apartment, you have to have your work visa already in hand to be considered, and you have to have, and Toronto is extremely competitive. And so as a foreigner, I had to set up a bank account, and I had to get checks, so that I can cut checks to the people I'm renting from. I have no credit history in Canada. So I'm essentially a risk all up and down, and so they don't have. There's so much competition, they don't even have to deal with you. They could just go, you know what, not worth the hassle.
Wow.
So it was extremely difficult. So I got a basement apartment. It's actually fantastic. I was actually here on a month-long shoot for HBO before starting at my new facility. And so I was supervising a show up here, and my wife came up for the month with me, and she was actually going around finding a place for me to live for the transition. So we kind of landed in Toronto, and I haven't been back to the US since. But
Well, that's interesting. Cool.
Yeah, so she'll be here in a week, and she really doesn't mind that it's not that it's disorganized. It's organized, but apparently that's too much embarrassment for her to stand.
It looks too bachelor. That's the thing.
So, but what I do then is I go, well, I can tilt it this way, and my bed's over there, and that's even a worse situation. And she's like, no, don't do that. So, and how are you been?
I've been very well. It's we're having a severe cold streak here in
no kidding, right? I thought I was going to lose you again this weekend.
Oh man, I mean, no, we had major. Yeah, it wasn't too bad this time, this storm, but the last one, it was one of those storms in Kansas City. We had these really bad storms where it's not too terribly cold, and if it snows a lot, it builds up on the trees and on the power lines. And in my neighborhood, all the power is up above. So I was without power till Saturday, I guess Sunday afternoon, went out Friday, I think. And so that was one of the worst ones we had in a long time, but it's beautiful though. It's so glorious. The trees have so much snow on them and stuff. So I mean, it's worth it, but it's really nice. But
you guys have those really long icicles too, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really nice. We get all the.
Kill you if they come off the house. Like at least ones I remember the ones from my childhood were like, 4 inches thick, at the top, and they're like little spears.
Yeah, actually, I think I got a picture on Facebook where I'm carrying one about 3 feet long. I'm holding it like a sword.
So this all, I'm just going to go over kind of the history, kind of how this hangout came about. Was you were on with Drag on his channel, I think, with Drag Not talking, and then I criticized your. I made a little video about analytic truths and why I thought that, and I attached it to a Sproul clip, and then we started a long interaction. But I kind of wanted to. I had heard, I think, on Drag's channel, you guys had talked about me hanging out with you, and I think I've mentioned it, I think, a couple of times before. Yeah, let's do a hangout, like maybe a year ago or something, or like at some point, and but I was always kind of busy and it never kind of came about. And then, so then we had that long interaction and we got into metaphysics a little bit. So I want to talk about that, but I also have, what I figured we'd want to do, or what we could do is, there are probably like 3 areas that I'd want to ask you about your take on things. And kind of press you on a couple of issues that I think I see with your apologetic or your Thomist views, and then you're free to interrogate my view. But first, I'd want to kind of start kind of with an internal critique of your view in terms of where I think it's got some inconsistencies.
Sure.
So do you want to kind of lay out your just kind of generally what the Thomist perspective is and how you view the problem of Parmenides and Heraclitus and change and act and potency and the one and the many. Do you want to maybe kind of quickly summarize the great conflict that you're trying to solve?
Sure. It really does start back with Heraclitus and Parmenides, who were 2 pre-Socratic philosophers, and Parmenides. Heraclitus said everything is changing. All we see is movement and change and everything, and so he said everything must be changed. He actually, interestingly, he was a monist. He did not believe, he wasn't a pluralist, but he believed within that one there is this a kind of eternal changing or something, and it's really kind of, to me, is incoherent. But then you had Parmenides on the other hand and said, his famous quote is, whatever is, and the change must be an illusion because you cannot, unless you have consistency of being, you cannot have existence at all. And Heraclitus has famously said that if you put your foot into a river and then take it back out, and then put it back in, you're not putting your foot back into the same stream. Everything has changed. Everything has moved on. It's not the same, and even your own self has changed within that time span where it has changed. And so there's a great controversy between those two great titans, and then there came a period of skepticism after that. The common person would say, well, if these two great guys can't figure it out, ultimate reality. That was the quest is for the RK, the ultimate reality. What is the ultimate reality behind everything? Is it physical? Is it non-physical? Is it singular? Is it plural? And so the people moved into a period of skepticism. And about that same time, the rise of you have the rise of elected government and the rise of what is it? Elected government and I keep wanting to say the same thing. Elected government and I can't remember what it is, but anyway, the rhetoric became a very important need because you persuade your audiences toward your perspective. And so you see the rise of the sophists come in, and they were professional teachers who would go around and instruct, and their specialty was rhetoric. And so what they did is they weren't so concerned about truth as much as they were about persuasion. Courts, jury,
right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so you wanted to be able to persuade, and so you got guys like Demosthenes who trained himself to speak eloquently with pebbles in his mouth, and he was so incredibly amazing rhetorician. But there began to be a degeneration in society because people, again, this is my whole thing now. I think we're living in a time like this where when you lose the concept of metaphysics, all you have is yourself, and you have the immediate in the moment. And so what everybody does is, rather than looking for the good of the whole, everybody begins to look to themselves and merely say, what can benefit me? Well, I think was it Democritus? No, it's Gorgias who said that whatever is good is whatever suits my personal needs. That's the good. And so you see this turning into the people. And what it does is eventually it begins the disintegration of society. And Socrates shows up on the scene, and his whole focus was that of virtue. He said that we've got to be focused on the good or the virtue. And he began to question and challenge people to think and to question their views. He was making fun of the way that the worship was constructed of his day, and so he was always questioning the norms of his day. He also was influencing the youth in a way that was causing disruption to society, and they eventually required him to kill himself. And he happily went with that because, I'm sorry, I'm talking about Plato right now. Socrates? No, that was Socrates. And I think Plato was 27 or so when he was attended Socrates's death. And then and Plato, the only thing we know about Socrates is because Plato wrote him down, because Socrates really didn't write anything down. And so Plato comes up with an idea with the one and the many, and he came up with the idea of the concept of idealism, where you have a place of eternal forms, and they give instantiation or truth to those things which are, he called them receptacles. Everything that we see down here is an imperfect copy of the perfect form in the realm of the ideal. It's an invisible, eternal realm where the perfection of everything is. And so Aristotle was his disciple, and Aristotle came after him and basically said, Plato, all you're doing is you're not solving the problem of the one and the many. This is a great question of all time. What is the ultimate reality, and how can you account for plurality without singularity? Or how can things instantiate unless they represent something that is in perfection? And so Aristotle said, Plato, all you're doing is you're just moving the problem up one level. You've got this realm of the forms, and it's all a bunch of, they're imperfection, but there's still all these different things. And he says it doesn't really solve the issue. So Aristotle said, let's just bring it down. Let's make sure that the forms are all within the instantiations here that we see within it. And he said that the forms are he said they're mental, and he said that they inhere though in the thing itself. Okay, and so what he wanted to start with, you probably know, Plato was a rationalist, and he said that the mind, the way to get to knowledge, is not through empirical verification, but it's through recollection. We came from the realm of the form. I don't know if you're familiar with the Meno dialogue, but Plato took a slave boy and got him to articulate the Pythagorean theorem, and he had never been educated in anything before in that realm, in mathematics. And Plato's whole point was, or Socrates, I'm sorry, Plato's writing about Socrates, and the whole point was that the boy could recollect these things that he already knew. So what we're trying to do is we're not learning anything. We're just trying to remember back to this form of the ideal that enables us to understand here things on this earth. So in other words, we already have all the knowledge that we need, and we don't really need like books or science or anything like that. Really, it was just start with the mind. And Aristotle said, no, we got to start with where we're at now, and we'll start with our sensory perception, and then we can extrapolate up to the mind. And so they had this again. So with Heraclitus and Parmenides, there was a time of skepticism. Then we see another time of skepticism even with Plato and Aristotle, and that was being resolved with the Christian paradigm, most significantly through St. Augustine. Well, the Apostle Paul coming through, but then St. Augustine going on him. And I don't know if you know that in the early part of the AD or CE was marked by a resurgence of Neoplatonism through Plotinus, and St. Augustine was a Platonist, Neoplatonist, before he was a Christian. And so what he did is he synthesized the thinking of Plato with Christianity. And then, as you well know, that Aquinas was well known for synthesizing Aristotelian thought with Christianity. And that's fascinating. Just the whole discovery of Aristotle through Avicenna and Averroes, the great thinkers of Muslim world of the mainly with the discovery of the libraries of Averroes and of Aristotle he had there. It was just like it's been well said, it was like a stargate for Christianity, medieval Christianity, to discover Aristotle. And we saw the Muslims through what's the guy's name? Al-Ghazali. He was anti-philosophy, and he said we need to go back to the Kalam school, go only look to the Quran. And so they squelched the use of Aristotle, and we saw them actually regress, but we saw the medieval Christianity flourish through the instrument and being able to have the thinking of really Plato and Aristotle in our thought. And that was regained rather around probably the 12th, 13th century, somewhere in there is when it really started to take off. And we see Thomas being the great synthesizer of that, and just bringing wonderful advances even for Christianity. Then we saw squelching again of that kind of thought through the Enlightenment. Most particularly, we saw the listen.
No. I'm laughing because Fox just wrote in the chat, Bert, why do you hate us so much?
My dear people love Fox.
Fox also said Trey is reading from Post-it notes around his monitor, and I said yeah, and I said yeah, the ceiling too, because you always look up at the ceiling. You kind of squint.
When I'm thinking,
you got things written up there, don't you? You're like unbeknownst to us, scrawled all around, almost like a prisoner in a cell. Trey has written the crazed writings of madman.
It's Trey's Plato cave. I'm looking for shadows of reality and trying to discern what's true. But anyway, so we saw where was I? Forgot what I was talking about.
Every time you look up now, I'm just going to start cracking up.
I can't help it. That's what I think. Some people got to hold their chin. I do that too sometimes. All right, so.
There's no place safe to look now, Trey. The gig is up.
I don't really know anything. I can't see that Post-it note. well, what was I talking about?
So, but the gist is that the it's the one in the there's a number of things that seem contradictory that we're trying to solve for, right?
Well, we're trying to make sense out of reality, and it's always going to go back to the I can't remember, was it Democritus who came up with the operon or the operon, which is the ultimate. He said is the ultimate reality. It must be timeless, non-physical, and ageless. Anyway,
so basically, Thomism offers to resolve this by God being the great being, the divinely simplistic being who has no properties, he has no parts, he's the one, he is the singularity, right? And then we have creation, which is becoming, right, which is constantly changing, and it's attempting to try to provide an account for reality that solves this paradox of how do you identify the Colorado River when it's constantly changing? What does that even mean, right? And so
it's to give an account for reality. It's M theory, if you will. I mean, what's the theory for everything? We want to understand it. This has been a great quest for mankind since 585 BC. I think it was when Thales came up and he predicted the first eclipse. But it was his great question as well. How do we?
And that was where Heraclitus and Parmenides were juxtaposed against each other, or they are in your as you they were Heraclitus came first and said that everything was changing, right? He pointed out that everything was changing. And then Parmenides had this notion of nothing, right? Of that there is no such thing as no thing, and there is it's not, and that's where you say it's not even a concept, right?
Right.
Because it's not coherent, right? And so then it can't be the case that things are changing, going in and out of existence, or anything like that, but that rather it must all be the same, that there is no change, right? He had this radical philosophy, or was radical at the time.
Right. He was trying to be, he's just trying to be consistent. And I think he was. And you've got to have an ontological distinction. You've got to have creator and creation. And so change must be necessarily marked by potential or a dependency. And ultimately, cause must be related to pure actuality without, and we've got those concepts of actuality and potentiality, which were Aristotelian terms that Thomas, employed.
And those were employed. The forms were employed such that so that you could have, well, at least in your account, they are the means by which the change occurs, right? So there's the potentiality, right? Everything has a potential state that other than God, right? God doesn't have potential; he's pure actuality.
Well, everything has but potential. But to have a potential state does not mean that it's, because here's what Aristotle would say is that the potential that a particular being has is guided by the form that it gives it instruction to what it is. In other words, this is what I was talking about. The principle of proportionate causality. Something cannot impart causal power unless it has that capacity or that feature. It may not have necessarily the feature, because you've got what are the features called? You've got formal features, and you've got what are they called? Formal, virtual, and I can't think of the other one. But in other words, like for example, fire would be a torch has the fire within it, and it can pass it to another torch. That would be a formal causal feature. But something like a lighter does not have the fire within it that's passing it on, but it has the virtual. I think it would be the virtual. I can't think of the other word. I think I wrote it down here. No, I didn't. Anyway, something can have the capacity to bring it about. Or like I had with Gaba guy, we used to go around. He said, sponginess is not within a cake mix, which is true, but it has the capacity to when you combine the ingredients, the flour, the baking soda, and the liquid and the heat, that it gives that actuality of a sponginess. So it may not have it directly.
Wait, but I mean, and this, I don't want to go down necessarily a segue here, but you are insistent that the property has to be within the thing imparting or creating, right? That you can't have new properties come about, right, out of thin air, right?
Eminently, that was the third question. Yes. In other words, a rock.
So the flour would need to have. So the flour would need to have sponginess to give rise to something that is spongy, right?
No.
Isn't that what you?
No, you're not understanding. No, I'm saying there's three different distinctions between the causal features. You're saying it's the formal feature of sponginess. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it would be the eminent feature of sponginess. In other words, let me give an example of for me to give you $20, okay, I could take $20 out of my wallet and I could hand it to you. That would be the formal causal ability to give you $20. But let's say I don't have $20, but I can wire it to you in my bank, from my bank to yours. That would be the virtual capacity. And then you could have the eminent ability or feature would be I could have access to the printing press that makes money. And so I can create the $20 to give to you. Those are three different distinct abilities to give it. So I don't have it. I don't have the $20 within me, or the cake mix does not have the formal sponginess, but it does have the eminent feature that enables it to impart sponginess through the combining of those elements.
So you're saying that that properties can come together to give rise to other properties.
Yes, that when we're talking about material properties there, but you've also got efficient.
I think you're going to run into a special pleading fallacy here with respect to intentions, and you're insistent that matter must have cannot that the properties with respect to matter cannot have the property of intentions come about by virtue of it, because you say that it has to be within the thing itself. Don't you make that argument all the time?
Yes, but aren't you saying? I mean, obviously, Bert, you don't believe that your mug can create a philosophical society. Do you agree with that?
No. Obviously, my mug cannot. No, I can. Right.
Okay. So you hold to the principle of proportionate causality then. You're saying that
if by that what you mean things can cause what they can cause and they can't cause what they can't cause, then yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, that's trivial.
No,
right? You can say that about anything. Like that doesn't give us any information.
But you concede the point, right?
Concede what point? That my mug can't create a civilization? Yeah, I'll concede that.
Okay. Okay, so
that doesn't mean that something constituted of matter cannot. I am constituted of matter. I can give rise to civilization.
Okay, but matter is not efficiency. This is the whole thing. Why the loss of Aristotelian thought?
But it's through. What did you say? It was imminent, or what was the term you used? I have various pieces coming together by which the property. There's the property. It gives rise to a phenomena that we describe as intentions, and I can intend to do something.
So what you don't understand, you're contradicting yourself. You're saying if you put a whole bunch of those mugs together, they could create a philosophical society.
Not mugs, no. I would need more than mugs, but it would be made out of the same constituent bits as mugs. It would be made out of atoms, let's say.
Okay, what kind of atoms that value things?
The kind of atoms you find in me.
Okay, so
in the configuration that they are in me.
Okay, so
which is what differentiates me from my mug. My mug is not a brain of which can have mental states. My brain can have mental states because it's of the configuration that would give rise to such.
Okay, so
but it's not giving rise to a new. When I say give rise, I mean that there is it's not a new phenomenon coming about. It's that we are describing the properties that are there interacting with each other to it's a level of description. I'm not invoking a new thing. I am rather describing a state that's occurring by virtue of the properties that are there. It's not giving rise to a new property. It's that I'm describing the interaction of these properties together by which this happens.
Okay, so
and that's no different. And that's no different than the sponginess of a cake.
Okay, so you would say that there is no such thing as you have a complete state where there's absolutely no value. In other words, and value is a function of intention. So you have a state of complete intentionality giving rise to intentionality, value. How does that work?
I have a state of intentionality.
No, you have a state of unintentionality. There's no intentionality in the universe.
Here, let me write this down, and when we get to my thing, we'll deal with let's see, state of unintentionality leading to intentionality. Is that what you wanted to say?
Giving rise to intentionality.
Nice. This is why I didn't want to necessarily go down this route, because I want to.
Well, we can just critique mine. That's fine if you want to do that.
No. I'm happy to give an account. I actually am eager to. But I want to. We just laid out this whole. Summarizing. There are contradictions that you feel are not present in the Thomist account, right? That it's a coherent, rather Christian account, sure. Not all Christians adhere to Thomism, though, right? Not everybody believes in divine simplicity, so it is.
Not all Christians
it's right. Well, yeah, sure. No, fair enough. And so this is your. You believe that you hold the a true conception of what God is, and that is a Thomistic rendering, or
yes.
A Sproullian rendering.
Sproul.
What's that?
It's Sproul, like roll.
Sproul. I know I say it wrong all the time, and I've heard it said Sproul, and I know better, but.
It looks like Sproul, though.
Everybody pronounces it Sproul, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, and I'm by the way, Trey, I love talking to you. I actually enjoy this. I actually enjoy our text conversations as much as you. I'm not sure if you think I get frustrated or something, but this is literally as I'm writing. This is my tone. Like I am never actually angry or frustrated or bitter towards you or whatever. I think
you idiot fundamentalist.
I have never said that. Okay, so anyway, let's get to I guess maybe I can put out my first challenge is I don't think that look, does God, so we've been down this road before. When God created, right? So God acted to bring about a state of affairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that act denotes a change in state for God.
No.
And you would say it doesn't.
No, it is active potency, but it's not passive. In other words, he was not changed. He enacted a change without undergoing, because if he has to undergo, then he's not self-existent. Any undergoing whatsoever requires contingency.
But that's just insisting that's
logic.
You're just insisting that it can't be the case that God doesn't change. So that can't be a change.
Because it's irrational. Well,
it's not if I say so how does God act to change without changing himself? Like wouldn't he be doing that? That would be perpetual, wouldn't it? It would be for all eternity. He would be instantiating universes, right? How is that not?
It is not a change. Well, okay, so when you've got an understanding of, it's hard for us to grasp anything. That's why so much of theology is apophatic. It's a negative theology because it's something that we cannot understand. But it does require. This is why Heracles and Parmenides. I mean, go back to that. It's the same thing.
Sure.
Parmenides, basically said that change is an illusion. It's a complete illusion, and this is why it's so dangerous. All right, so the guys, I think you may have read a little bit of the contemporary. I know that who's the guy? Joe Sunseed. I'll use his whatever number.
Sure. Yeah.
I had a delightful hangout with him. I don't know if you saw that, but he has read some of the contemporary Christian philosophers who do not hold to simplicity, and in their counting, I forgot what my point is going to be, but their counting is incoherent. And it's not historic, of course, as well. Okay. And when I talk about Thomism, I'm not talking about something that Thomas invented or anything. It was nothing new what he brought, but he was clarifying. Same with Augustine.
So when we say something's incoherent, we're saying there's a contradiction entailed, right?
That's right.
Right. Okay. So
this is what I want to say. Can I finish this real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So what these guys want to do, like William Lane Craig and Alvin Plantinga and stuff, these guys, what they want to do is they're called theistic personalists. And what they say is that God is an instantiation, a perfection of humanity. And he says that God, for example, thinks the same way that we do. And therefore, we must only, talking about God, we must only have univocal language. Okay. And this is one of the things that Thomas was very good at clarifying and making clear. He said there are three types of language: univocal language, equivocal language, and analogical language. And univocal language would be like, give me an example. I'm using the same term like this, like I have hair and you have hair. We're talking about the same thing. You got more than me, but we're talking about the same type of thing. Okay, there's no now, but if I were to say I was in my attic the other day and I swung a bat at a bat, that would be a use of equivocal language, where the terms have no correlation whatsoever, but that is the same term. All right, when you use the term like analogical language, there is a correlation, but it's not perfect. And for example, I could say, R.C. Sproul uses the concept of, goodness. The term changes in meaning according to the being that's being described. And so I think we've talked about this, where you say that my dog is a good dog, and then I say that my neighbor is a good neighbor. I'm not saying that my neighbor doesn't wet the floor and he doesn't bite the mailman. It's in a different term. So that term love changes in its meaning. And so when we are talking about God, we are using a language that would be known as analogical language. And it's necessarily so because for us to think, we must, this is real key here, we must predicate. Okay. Sure. So every time we got a subject and predicate. So we're taking the thing that we're talking about, and then we're adding something to it. We're synthesizing with it. When God thinks, he doesn't predicate. There's no becoming, because our logic is marked by is marked by becoming. It's marked by potentiality. That's how we learn things. Everything is linear for us. And so when we're relating to God, this is why you see things, it's called anthropomorphisms or anthropopathisms in the scriptures, where you see God, taking on forms of human, and God saying that he regretted that he made man. And at the same time, it says, I, the Lord, do not change. How do you reconcile those things? Well, you've got to understand that God has got to use language that we can understand, because it's incommunicable to pass on pure perfection or pure being. And so what it's got to do is, just like we do this when we talk to children, we dumb down our language, and it may not be exact, but our language is corresponding to the whatever we're talking about in some way. So these guys that are real popular right now in philosophy, they're, number one, they're ahistorical, and they're very innovative with their views on these particular issues. But they also require that we have univocal language when we're talking about God. And it's just not possible. You can't do that, because God himself has incommunicable attributes. And so for us to understand them would be impossible. If they're incommunicable, they can't be shared, like eternality or omniscience. You cannot share that. So if God were to take those characteristics that are incommunicable and share them with us, well, then he would be communicating them. and they would not be pure becoming. They would be potentials by definition. So it's not possible. So this is why I always say, and when we get to the end of our inquiry, I have to go to mystery, but I don't go to mystery as a get out of jail card. Logic leads me to where I get to the final point of and I don't like to get there. I push as hard as I can until I get there, and I got to say, okay, mystery, that we cannot, because we cannot participate in it. But
wait, but you don't say you don't say mystery. You say he must be this way, right? Like, you're holding out a contradiction. You're saying he is and he isn't,
No, because I've already, have I not already made the case that they're incommunicable attributes necessarily?
Well, that simply means that there's a contradiction that you can't reconcile.
No, that's different.
How is it? How is it different?
Because logic for us, a contradiction requires predication. Do you agree with that?
Logic for us entails predication. Sure.
Okay. Does God, as I have defined him, does God predicate?
Does God himself predicate?
Yeah.
Well, he wouldn't be able to by my lights because he doesn't change states, right?
Right. So
okay.
He doesn't have any potentiality.
So are you saying, okay, so gosh, there's too many paths to take. But I'll hope I can remember my way back to take another one down the road. So is God unaware that he has created? I'll go back. Like that's my objection to that. God instantiates the universe. Is he unaware that has occurred?
How could he be unaware? Because that would be an imperfection.
Okay, so he's aware that there is so before God creates, the proposition there is a universe would be false, right? After God creates, the proposition there is a universe would be true. Is God aware of that change in truth value of that proposition?
Well, it's not a change from his perspective. You're trying to impose yours.
No. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about God. So God has created, right? Before God creates, that proposition is false. Is God able to apprehend that proposition? Like, is God able to propositions? Are propositions something God is aware of?
What do you mean by proposition?
Like a proposition, a statement of the world.
You mean a becoming statement?
No, I just mean a state. Is God aware of states of affairs? Does he have awareness?
States of affairs, yes. But when you say
okay, so is God aware of the fact that there is no universe yet?
What do you mean by yet?
I'm saying God has yet to create, right? You're saying God acts, right?
Because you're defining him within time then again.
No, well, so God doesn't wait. So God doesn't create then. Is that what you're saying? Does God act to create?
The creation act is not something that is marked by potentiality.
Wait, hold on. I can't hear you. Sorry, the creation act what?
Hold on just a second. Can you hold a second?
Yep, no problem.
Can you hold a second? Let me see myself.
No problem. You guys are cracking me up. I have too hard of a time not laughing at that stuff. Okay, so you said oh gosh, you said
you said was God aware of his creating and
right. So I said, did God act to bring about creation?
Yes.
Okay.
How
is God aware that he had before God had acted to bring about creation? So the state, forget about the word before.
Okay.
The state where there was no universe, is God aware that there's no universe?
Aware in what sense? Again, you're
okay. Hold on. So you want to say that God created? So God, there's something God is doing, right? Like I know you don't. You want to say, well, I don't know what an act is for God, or I don't. But you want to say God did something, right? That God had an intention to bring something about and did it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't perpetually bring it about for all eternity. It's not like there's this instantiation that's just perpetual, coexistent, eternal with God. There are discrete states of affairs. There's the state where there is no universe, and then there's a state where there is a universe. And you want to say that God caused that state to change, right? To go from a state where there's no universe to go to a state where there is a universe.
He did.
right? And there's an order to those things, right? There's a order. There's no a state where there's no universe. The state with a universe cannot precede the state with no universe, right?
Not from his perspective. Again, to understand time from God's perspective cannot entail in any way potentiality.
So this is outside of our time, right? We're saying that God. We're talking about two states. We don't even have to talk about time. We have state A and we have state B, and we want to say that that God had something to do with state A and with state B, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order for God to bring about state B, however we want to talk about that, state B comes about by virtue of state B not already being the case, right? Like there is no universe. God has to have an awareness that there is no universe to think I should create a universe, or I'm going to create a universe first, or not even talk about him thinking, but there's his doing something was what entailed there being no universe, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So is God aware that there is no universe? And then is God aware that there is a universe? In state A, is God aware there is no universe? And in state B, is God aware that there is a universe? He doesn't need to bring one about again. He already brought one about.
No, because you're describing it as if God is living in a state of potentiality.
So you said that no, he's not aware. That
no, there's not something that he's not aware of.
Okay.
And so the idea of movement where you have predication as we understand it cannot be.
But you're saying that God acted. Are you not predicating of God?
Yes, and that's why,
I have
to use analogical language.
Well, no, but when you utter a contradiction, am I not to go, hey, that's a contradiction? Am I not allowed to say that?
No, because
you're able to say that's off limits. So we're gonna allow contradictions to exist now.
No, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that. I'm not using it as a get out of free jail card. I am saying at the end of the thing, when I say that, I am saying that we cannot predicate about pure actuality.
But you are predicating about it. You're saying it acted to bring about a universe.
Analogically, that's what I'm saying. It's not an exact.
Where's the analogy? Because I don't have any. When you act, do you change?
Yes, I do, and that's why I cannot not do it.
So where's the analogy? Where's the analogy between? How is that? Where's the point of contact between those two things?
Well, we can say that when we choose to do something, there is an effect. Okay, and that there is such a thing as volitional happening, but for us, it's marked necessarily by potentiality. God has volition; He is a personal being. But you said his state of being in that where He brings things to pass cannot have potential to it.
Doesn't acting entail choosing to do something, right? Like that's core, that's essential to it, right?
Right.
When we say something acts, we say it chooses to do something.
Right.
There's an awareness there. There's an intention behind it. There is that when we act, we are going from one state to another, right? And then you're saying, well, we need to analogize to what God does, right? But analogies, when I look over and I go, my comforter on my bed looks like an apple, right? There's a point of contact between that, is that they're both red.
That's
or
right.
Maybe the shape stimulates an apple, right? But I'm not saying that, but I'm saying a number of other things that it's not, right? But I have a point of analogy between the two, right? And what I'm asking you is, what is the similar point between the act to create that we do and the act to create that God does? Because right now,
desiring to do something and something comes to pass.
That's like the full definition. There's no other property you're referring to.
But
what is the analogy between God's act and my act? What are the properties that they share?
That we can do something and that it can.
But when you say we can do something, isn't entailed in there a change of state? Like that is definitional to it, right? So you're saying God's not that, right? So that we do something cannot be in that point of analogy.
All right,
because you're saying.
Okay, let me turn tables on you and ask you, how then do you justify being?
I don't have to.
Because no, what you do is you start.
I will gladly on the second half of this conversation defend what I think is the case. But right now, like, I don't have to. In lieu of an account, I don't have to go, well, I'll make something up that's incoherent because I have to. Well, that's just crying.
I've already given my account. I said that that we are not able to participate in incommunicability of perfection because we ourselves are marked by potential. We were born.
But you are saying something. You're saying he acted, right? So you're attempting to say something about it, that he acted. And when I ask you what that means, based on all these other things you're saying, well, that's a contradiction, but it has to be that way because he acted. Well, no.
Well, I never said it was contradiction. I never said that.
No, I'm pointing out the contradiction. And when I point out the contradiction, you say, well, we can't refer to it properly. So the contradiction's there. We just don't understand it.
Does it make sense to you, though, that pure actuality cannot be marked by potential? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, if what you mean by pure actuality, so what you mean by pure actuality is no potential. So you're saying is no potential. Does no potential entail no potential? Well, that's trivial. Yeah, no potential entails no potential.
Okay, so then therefore,
but hold on. When I act, I have the potential to act. So now I'm predicating about. Look, I'm talking like you. I'm predicating about this thing that has potential to act. Right? Well, now I can't say about it that, well, it has no potential because it had the potential to act. How can I say that? How can I insist that must be the case?
Right? Because it's irrational to say the otherwise. In other words, you're wrestling contradiction and then accusing me of being contradiction, but I'm the one who starts with logic and you're the one who starts with irrationality.
Well, I didn't start with irrationality, but
sure you do. Is everything potential?
Yeah, potentially.
Okay, so what is it before its potential?
So I think that you can have this is going to dovetail right back into my view, which I do want to get to. I'm not trying to avoid that.
Yeah, I don't know what else I can say to you, Bert. That's what I'm saying. It's like
no. Hold on though. I don't have to give an account to justify your positions, right?
That's true. I'm not saying you do.
Right. Okay. So you right now are giving me a contradiction.
No, I'm not.
You're saying that God acts, but that he doesn't change.
He does not predicate. He cannot predicate.
Okay, then he cannot act.
Okay, he cannot act in the way that we act because we are becoming.
No, he can't act at all. What way can he act? Hold on. Okay, so I'll let you say it. In what way can he act that we can act?
And that something can come to pass. But for us, we both have active potency and passive potency. We have to, because
is he aware that something has come to pass?
It's not like he became aware of it.
Okay, so the truth. Yeah. So the truth value of it came to pass. It came to pass, right? That was false. That was false. That was false before he acted, before things came to pass. Before things came to pass, that was a false statement, right? And after it came to pass, that's a true statement, right? We're saying that there's a state where nothing came to pass, where something hadn't come to pass, and then there's a state where something had come to pass. And you're saying God brought about that state. But then you're saying God doesn't have awareness that a change has occurred in the same way that we have an awareness that a change has occurred.
Not that we learn things, yeah.
Right. So
he's not omniscient.
God didn't learn that he had created, is what you're saying.
No.
Okay, so then how did God know not to create again?
You're placing it in such a way that God.
No. You just made a claim. You said God was not aware. God did not learn anything. God did not learn anything when he created. He didn't learn anything. So right. He couldn't have learned that he had created and didn't need to create again. Right. That's entailed in that. If God didn't learn anything when he created, he couldn't have learned that he created. It had to have been that. He can't.
It's not like, No, because again,
So again, what is the reason then that God doesn't create again? Why doesn't God create and save humanity again?
Again, how is he going to do that?
I'm asking you. How is he going to do that?
Well, I'm saying,
how is he? By what mechanism?
Again, then he learned it to begin, something that he didn't know. Do you agree with
Trey, that? It doesn't matter what the consequences are to your concept. I'm asking you, what if God didn't learn anything, didn't learn that he had created, why doesn't he create again?
He didn't need to learn. That's the whole point. He knew
he had
all things in perfection, as if you want to say it like in a block. We can't even completely understand it, but you got to say it's like a block of everything is understanding. At one point in time, he could not have any potentiality within him.
So then God,
outside of time, is a different block.
Okay, so all of creation and everything is part of the block. That it's all necessary. Couldn't have been otherwise.
I could concede that, but what you're mixing ontological necessary with suppositional necessity.
I'm saying logically necessary. They're logically necessary. It couldn't have been the case that it couldn't have been the case that we're having this.
Well, what do you mean by logic?
Our conversation right here had to have been the case.
Say it again.
There's no possible world in which this conversation between you and me couldn't have happened.
No, because
it's all necessary.
It's not.
God can't learn anything new.
No, not from his perspective. Yes, but within this realm, while it's happening, there is secondary causal agency.
Wait, what are you talking about? You just said that God can't learn anything new, right? He can't learn that in one possible world you did this, and in another possible world you did that, right?
Well, I'm not saying that
you're saying his awareness doesn't change, that he is aware of all states. He is just a block. He's a block.
Right.
Okay. So all states are entailed by that block. They couldn't have been otherwise.
Yeah. Yes. What you're voicing this in such a way, or placing it in such a way that the whole idea of necessary worlds to me is silly when you're talking about necessary being, because God is not standing. This is William Lane Craig again. God is standing before an array of all the choices. Do those choices instantiate before God? In other words, is God out shopping? God is a contingent in that view, and this Molinist view as well, where you say God has middle knowledge.
So you say God necessarily acted as he did.
Well, when we talk about God's freedom, we're not saying that God is free like we are, libertarian free will, like you can choose apple pie or chocolate cake, but rather God is not, what do you call it, influenced by anything outside of himself. Right.
There's nothing extrinsic to God that forms his opinions or causes him to do things.
That's right.
But it couldn't have been the case that, but basically, it couldn't have been the case that God didn't create. God necessarily created.
Again,
God is contingent on his creating, because if he hadn't created, he wouldn't be who he is.
No, he's not. He's not contingent on his creation.
He's logically contingent. He's logically contingent on it. If he hadn't created, he wouldn't be who he is, right?
Okay, well that which is contingent is an effect, right?
No, I'm not talking about. That's what you're saying. I'm not talking about dependence. I'm saying he's logically contingent.
Contingent necessarily.
Okay. So if does the start of a ruler is he? Wait, I don't want to put this. A ruler necessarily has a start and an end to it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is the end of the ruler contingent on the start of the ruler?
The ruler itself is contingent. It's matter. It's material.
No, I'm not talking about. I'm just talking about logicalness. It's fine. In order to have a race necessarily entails a start and an end, right?
Yes, because it's material.
Is the end of the race contingent on its start?
The whole thing is contingent.
No, is the
potentiality?
Not so. I'm not saying, I'm not talking about, no, I'm asking you, so I'm not asking you as to the state of the whole race. I'm asking you about the end of the race. Is the end of the race logically contingent on the start of the race?
Yes, because it's marked by potentiality, and it cannot be eternal.
Thank you. And so God is contingent in the same way that a start of a race, an end of a race is contingent on the start. God is
it's contingent.
It's fine. This is a trivial point. I don't want to go down this road. So so look at, if you're willing to say that God is a block with no awareness, with no awareness in the sense that that it does things by act of will such that it can be otherwise. I
can't say that, because you're saying act of will as again, you're putting in terms of potential.
Well, a will entails the ability to deliberate courses of action, but you're saying God doesn't have any courses of action. He has one course of action.
He has yes. If he has courses of action, you're saying, well, what is the other realm in which he is choosing from for these courses of action? What outside?
Do you think does he have the ability to deliberate, to choose what to do?
Not like we do. He can't, because there's nothing for which to choose.
Okay, so God is on the rails. So God has no choices.
Well, no, he has choices, but he cannot have choices by something outside of himself.
By what means can he choose otherwise?
Well, he's not limited.
What would be the reason that he would choose otherwise?
I don't know.
Are there any reasons by which he could choose otherwise?
There are reasons, but they're not predicational as we have them.
What reason? Oh, wait, you just said you don't know if there are reasons, and then you said there are reasons.
I can't.
So you don't.
I cannot.
So you can't say that there are reasons if you don't know that there are reasons, right?
I cannot say that there are reasons the way that we reason through predication.
Okay, but so how are you? What is the other? What is the way you can say that there are reasons, and how do you know that?
Because I'm a reasonable animal, and I cannot reason irrationally. Same thing with the value thing. You cannot.
You're simply. It's just special pleading up and down. You're just basically saying the consequences. What you're saying is the consequences to my concept would be too dramatic, so it can't be that way.
Well, yes, too irrational. Yeah, I've got to be.
You're like Parmenides saying, well, it can't all be changing. That doesn't make any sense to me. So even though it's contradictory to say things aren't changing, I'm just going to say that.
But I'm just
going to insist that must be the way it is, because I can't understand it any other way.
Okay, listen.
But you're uttering a contradiction.
Okay, I've got about 20 minutes, Bert. I've got a very busy day today. So Can we switch to your side?
For sure. Yep. Yeah. And maybe we can do a follow-up hang-up, because I want to talk about potency and forms and go for it. So what do you want to know about? Do you want me to just kind of lay out my view? Do you want me to talk about metaphysics a little bit?
Well, here's the problem that I have is that for me, I've always stated that I've got to start with a law of non-contradiction and sense perception. That's always my two things. And I extrapolate to there, and I come to the point when I say pure being cannot predicate, therefore it must end in a sense of mystery. But my allegation to you is that you begin with contradiction at the very beginning of your inquiry.
What's the contradiction at the beginning of my inquiry?
That all existence is potential. It's an effect without a cause.
I actually haven't said that. So that's not the core of my, that's not the start of my inquiry. The start of my inquiry is not founded on the principle that all things are potential. Where did you get that? Where's the reason for you thinking that?
Because unless there's something purely actual, everything must be potential.
That's the start. Do you think that I hold that belief as the start of my inquiry?
That's a lot. You're saying there is no pure actuality, because that's what I'm positing.
That's not the start. That's not the start of my.
Okay, what's the
inquiry. My properly basic beliefs would probably be my start.
Okay, that's your epistemology. We're talking about metaphysics here.
All right, you talked about the inquiry. How do I know things? You said,
no,
you said it
we're
yourself.
talking metaphysics here, and of course we've got to deal with.
You said the start of my. What is the start of my inquiry? And I have these properly basic beliefs that are the grounds by which
and tell me about the properly basic beliefs. How do you justify that?
I don't. That's why they're properly basic. I assume them. I assume the reliability of my memory. My dad had Alzheimer's, and he assumed the reliability of his memory.
Okay.
He had no means. He had no means. He had no means by which to get outside of himself and determine that his memory was faulty. Right. I assume my memory is correct.
Okay. So how is that different from me?
No, I think you have properly basic beliefs too.
Okay. Yeah. It's sense perception and LNC, the law of non-contradiction. Those are my.
I think you have. I think sense. I think you go. I think you have a lot more than sense perception that you assume.
Well, in my inquiry, yes, of course, but I'm saying generally that I can my sense perception.
The law of non-contradiction is also a properly basic belief that I hold.
That's right. Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
So how do you justify?
Great. So you and I both start our inquiry at the same point.
That's right. So tell me, through your instrumentation, how do you formulate what is your metaphysic from that?
From that, there's a long ways to go in terms of building out, taking in the world, right? So I have a lot of beliefs I've formed through my sense perception, right? And I hold concepts of the world, right? And I live in a social context with other humans, and then we kind of butt our concepts up against reality to see what sticks, right? We make certain theories about how things, if this is the case, then this would be the case, and then we go out and we test it, and if that holds, then we I like the analogy of the map and the territory, and so I'm mapping the territory as I go. And I draw things. The more I encounter or make trips through the territory, through certain portions, my marks become a little darker and a little harder to erase, right? And so, and I'm working out. I'm also, because I'm an artist, I really like the analogy, because when I sit down to sketch out a landscape, I place features, and as I go, I start to work out their relative relationships and figure out where my errors are. And sometimes I have to move a whole portion a little bit over. And so I try to sketch fairly lightly at first, because I'm kind of working things out. So, like, for instance, when I no longer profess to be a Christian.
Can you hold just a second?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're getting there, Fox, in terms of letting answering as to why he thinks I think everything's potential.
I am back.
Okay. So the where were we? So
you sound like you're bluffing a lot. I'm asking for your metaphysic. I'm asking for your metaphysic, and you're just giving me this. Well, I do this. I don't care how you.
What would you like? What do you want to know about my metaphysics? What's my notion of concepts and objects?
No, what's your notion of reality? How do you justify being and becoming, potentiality and actuality?
Well, I don't have a strong view on. I think change actually occurs, right? So I think I don't know if anything's static in the universe.
So you're saying there are effects.
If anything, I think the universe is or what is actual is moving all the time. So it's dynamic all the time.
Okay, but when something moves, it is dependent upon that which enacts upon it. That which
the prior state entails the next state. Sure.
Right. And so it was,
and I'm generally committed to determinism. So I think that the that the prior state determines the next state, and I don't think there are any potentials. How about that for a shocker?
Okay,
I don't think there are actual potentials. I think there is only.
Are you potentially dead?
No, because I'm alive. I'm not potentially dead. I'm not potentially dead. I think that possible worlds. I think possible. No, I didn't laugh, did I?
You just did.
Because you caused me to laugh.
Right. But you had potential to laugh, and I actualized.
No. Nope. So there's no such thing as George Clooney could potentially have been president. So I don't believe that there are possible other alternatives. What I think is that our what we consider to be potential of something. So this mug potentially could be full, and what that entails is I'm making inferences as to what the next state, based on my familiarity with mugs, what that state might be, what that state potentially could be. But it doesn't mean that it could be actual. I don't think it could be actual. Okay, I don't think there are. I think there is one necessary state of affairs that is and there is no potential otherwise for it.
So there's no change.
No, there is change within that state of affairs. There's change. There's just no potential otherwise. It could not have been otherwise. When something is the case, there's not a potential other, an actual potential other path that could have gone. That is my inferences at work.
Okay, so how do you have determinism indeterminately?
What do you mean determinism indeterminately?
Well, you're saying there's purpose to everything. Everything is moving according to its plan.
I didn't say everything had purpose. I don't believe that there's an antecedent purposive cause to everything that is intending states of affairs.
Determined indeterminately.
There is the prior state determines the next state, with
potentially be the state that it is in before it is actual.
Yeah, there is, to my knowledge, there are potential states that could be the next state.
Okay,
which one of them will actually be the case? I do not know.
Okay,
but that I can imagine. But that I can merely imagine alternative states based on inferences. You could ask me, well, why would you think that could potentially be the case? And I can render an account because I have certain inferences I've accumulated. But that doesn't mean that could be an actual state. I don't know what the next actual state might be.
Okay, so is change an illusion for you?
No, change is not an illusion for me.
Okay. Does change denote dependency?
Dependency on the prior state of affairs, sure.
Okay. So everything is dependent in its nature.
Dependent on the prior state of affairs, sure. I'm a
All right. Is a
determinist.
dependent thing an effect by definition?
Yes, if something is determined by a prior state, it is an effect.
Okay, so everything is an effect without a cause.
No, every effect has a cause.
You said that every state that changes is dependent, and everything that is dependent is an effect.
Yep.
That means that everything is an effect.
That means everything's an effect, and every effect has a cause.
Okay, and so let's take your whole world. Okay, let's put it in a box. Okay, everything is an effect, and everything has a cause. Let's go back to the beginning hierarchically.
The universe, the entire set of reality that entails these changing states, that entire thing was not caused to be.
Okay, so it's an effect without a cause.
It's not an effect. It's not and it's not cause.
Did it happen?
No, it didn't happen. It's happening the entire time.
Okay, well, happening is just it happened.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So,
in both directions, right? So we can. No, so there's nothing irrational. Where's the contradiction? You accused me. Hold on. You accused me of entailing an effect without a cause. Where is the effect without a cause? Which one did I entail?
That which happens.
It had a cause.
That which happened is dependent upon that which brought it to the position
that which happens was caused by the prior state. And what caused that state? The prior state. So that prior state is an effect of. So let's label them. Let's go ahead and we'll label them with numbers. We'll go from current moment is 0, 1 in the direction of the future, and -1 in the direction of the past. So which one which cause effect is the one that that had to start it all? Which one am I positing had no number before it?
None of them could cause each other because they're all effects.
They're all effects of prior causes, sure.
No. The cause doesn't exist.
Sure it did. It caused
Because
the next state.
It's an effect before it causes. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. So this state.
So everything is an effect at base.
Hold on. Let me finish, Trey. This state is the effect of the last state, and it is the cause of the next state.
Right. And so it was an effect before it was a cause.
It was an effect of the prior cause, and it is the cause of the next effect.
And the thing that caused that was an effect before it was a cause, right?
Right, all the way back.
So everything is an effect at base. That's what you're saying.
Everything is an effect of an antecedent cause. They're not all the effect of the same cause. I'm not saying that.
No, they're all effects, period. That's all you're saying.
No, and hold on. I'm saying more than that, Trey. I'm saying they're all effects and they're all causes.
Yes, but you're not in the same time, the same relationship, right?
Exactly, not in the same time, in the same relationship. It was an effect before it caused the next state. Sure.
Right. So everything is an effect at base.
And everything is a cause at base.
I think you know where your problem is there.
What are you talking about? Where's the contradiction? Right. You still haven't drawn the contradiction.
Yes, I have. You cannot have an effect give rise to a cause when it's an effect to begin with, because it had to be and not be the same time, the same relationship.
How you just said that an effect cannot give wait, how did you say that?
An effect cannot give rise to a cause, which is what you're saying.
It's not giving the effect is the cause of the next state.
But it's not the cause at the same time, right? It's an effect before it is a cause.
Sure it is.
Okay, so how do you have something that doesn't have, it's not actualized what it is.
So cause and effect denote the relationship, right? So the current state caused the next state. The next state is the effect of the cause, right?
But an effect is marked by a change in being, which would be, this is why you don't like the word potentiality, but it's the same thing. Effect, potential, same thing. No,
effect and potential are not the same thing. Well,
so this conversation, there's no difference.
I think all states, there is no potential otherwise. I'll put it that way.
There's no potential otherwise, but it moves into the actual state that what it is because it was potentially.
Yeah, and I think, I don't believe that there's actually a thing called potency or potential. I think those are words that we use to talk about. They're the concept.
Okay.
They're the concept. Hold on. So they're the concept that relates to the world. So it's the way of representing the world, right? So we use language to represent the world.
Okay.
And what?
So you're a nominalist, right?
I'm not a traditional nominalist. I'll say that. So I don't think that I create categories and designations. I think we create.
So they already exist?
No.
Oh, so you're a conceptualist?
No. So I'm not sure what is entailed by conceptualist, but I can tell you what I am.
Well, conceptualist, you make the categories in your mind. They're categories in the mind, but you make them.
No. No. I think that I think this is a failure at its core to understand the role of language. So I think all concepts are linguistic in at their root. That without language there would be no concepts. And so
so we're creating reality by our words?
No, our language language doesn't make the world. What counts as an object or as reality is a function of representation. It's a function of representation, which we call language, right? So language is a system of representing the world, and it is something that we place on the world. So it comes about via. So I think meaning comes about via our use in interacting, right? And our concepts derive from those meanings. And so I do not believe that I create the concepts. I think that the concepts are derivative of language, which is a social activity.
Okay, so a whole bunch of people make them.
I think we all make them, the collective.
Okay, what's the difference between the collective making them and you making them? How is that any different? Because you're creating reality.
Because I don't believe in private language. So I don't believe that I render what meaning is. I don't think meaning is determined by me making up meaning in my head.
But if you make up a meaning and then you tell it to somebody else and they agree with you, then it is what it is, right?
What they do is they look at my use of the word, and where we agree on the meaning, we're intelligent. We have there's a norm to language. Language is normative.
Okay.
It's predicated on its being intelligible.
Okay. Do you believe in the correspondence theory of truth?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay, so what correspondence theory of truth is that there is reality outside of ourselves, and that when we use speech, if you will, we are
it corresponds to states of affairs.
And those states of affairs, do they exist?
Yes, those states of affairs exist.
And we're just naming them, right?
No, they don't determine their meaning by me designating them as such. It is that through the use that my observed use of it is what denotes its meaning.
Right. But it has an objective. It is objective being, if you will, outside of your naming it, right?
Right. Yeah, sure. The objects themselves, the reality by which my language represents the world exists.
Because otherwise, when you're naming it, you're really naming nothing. But actually, we are naming things when we put language to them.
Well, yeah, they don't get their meaning by virtue of my naming them. They get naming by virtue of my public use, and it's being understood.
Okay, but that to me, that's no different than you're just saying nominalism is a lot of people doing it. We're creating reality when we all just.
Yeah, I think language. I think language and meaning comes about by virtue of public meaning. That meaning is
something outside of yourselves as a society, right?
But it's my use that determines the meaning.
Right, but the thing itself
is my use, right? and my use is in a social context.
Okay, well, Bert, I need to get going. I've got literally, I had the most difficult crown I've ever done to shade to match. Okay, it's an implant crown, front tooth, hardest one, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna be so hard. And I worked and slaved on it for like 2 days, worked on it. I was like, I think I got it. And so it had one little pit on the back. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna put a little porcelain and I'm gonna run it up. And right before we left last night, I pick my son up to school. So my son and I are here, and it comes out of the oven. I look at it, and it had broken in half, but the porcelain sheared off. So I've got to do it all again. The patient's coming in Monday.
No.
So
I'll let you go, Trey, because I don't want them to have a big they have a brown tooth, but I really made the case for God on Saturday.
You know what? It actually is, it's almost black. It's tetracycline. That's why it's so hard, because they don't make porcelain that color, and I've got to internally stain it. It's very difficult. But,
so real quick, maybe we could do a follow-up, maybe like in wait, let's see, my wife comes on Wednesday, so maybe like in a month. You want to do another hangout?
Yeah, that's fine, because I'm on next couple of weeks. I think I'm gonna be busy. So yeah,
that sounds
we'll
good.
Go ahead and do it. We'll just put it on the calendar. And
okay, it's good chatting with you, Trey.
Well, no, you're one of my favorite interlocutors, Bert, because I feel like you kind of understand things. A lot of people don't. Like I said, I really enjoyed Joe Creason, because I was amazed at the stuff that he knew, and he's very nice, and we have a nice conversation, and I enjoy you because I feel like we're having a real conversation with real ideas and not just trying to beat each other over the head.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of times. I was joking with somebody. Who was I talking to recently? I was talking to somebody. Oh, I know. I met with. I better not say that. I might get in some trouble. But I met with a person, and oftentimes, and this person, she allowed me to share my views, and I was like, I am so appreciate that you allowed me, because a lot of times when you share somebody, when the opponent gets nervous, they just start talking over you, start talking loud and stuff like that. And it's like, I had that one of those a couple of weeks ago, and I just said, and a lot of people said, "Oh, he killed you, Trey." I was like, no, he wouldn't let me talk. And I'm like, I'm going to move on. Thanks for talking. So I always have the opportunity. We have an exchange. We allow each other to talk. It's a spirited banter, but there's substance being exchanged. And so I very much appreciate that.
Yeah. I do want to point out that I actually do. I know, like, people, like, if you watch over the history of your videos, Trey, like over the last 4 years or however long it's been, you can see the particular topics you are interested in at the time and what you've been reading recently or what you've been listening to recently. And I could tell you really enjoy the rich history and all of the facets of it. So I do actually enjoy seeing that kind of that enjoyment on your part. We wish you were a little more broadly read.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, this is what life is all about. You know, what was it? What Socrates said? The unexamined life is not worth living. You know, that we live in an age where everything is just about, you know, sensual pleasure. And I don't necessarily mean sexual, but I mean, just, again, we're in a time of skepticism where everything is about me. And I think that we all need to be circumspect and be thinking about these ultimate issues because they are very important in the way that we live our life. And I think for society as a whole for long term. And so I think these kind of conversations help foster that kind of thinking. That's why I appreciate it.
Yeah, let me try to put together something that I can present to you as my view, because I've been wanting to do that anyway. There are a lot of topics I want to talk about just in the community in general, and some videos I've been wanting to do. But I'll try to get something together that's a bit more organized, and then I can go through it similar to the way that you lay out your view. But obviously, I think I'm more familiar with your views than you are with mine. So I'll try to kind of lay them out, and then we can have a conversation about them. So
okay, that sounds good.
All right,
yeah. All right, good talking to you.
Good talking to you. And I'm going to invite other people into the Hangout. So if you guys want to message me or whatever, we'll just do a little after thing.
Okay. All right. I'm out of here, Bert.
All right. Take care, Trey.
Okay. We'll see you.
Okay. See you. If people want the join link, go ahead and message me. And then if nobody wants to join, I'll just cry for about 5 minutes and then close it out. So go ahead and message me on Hangouts, I guess. I'll keep an eye on it. That was a good conversation. I do enjoy talking to Trey. And I'm not terribly interested in correcting him up and down on certain things. It's more I want to kind of get through that and get to the kind of the core issues. And I have been wanting to do some videos on language and on the importance of, because I think when I started to really think about metaphysics and in terms of concepts and objects and how we refer and how it is we construct the world, like what do our concepts represent, and are they really these things that are intrinsic to the objects, or this? And I obviously don't believe that at all. I think it's that we're representing the world and that we have a shared concept. There's the scientific image and the manifest image, and I think that we have our sense perception by which. Come on, guys! Somebody message me and come on in, like TJ or Fox or anyone. Yeah, I wanted to get to my argument, Sealing Spirits. It was I was really unsatisfied by the dissatisfied by the good grief, man. I just attract anybody up. Yeah, Floyd, jump on in. Let me. I'll send you the link, Floyd. There you go. I messaged it to you on Hangouts. Fox probably has a sleeping baby. I'll message Fox. Hey, TJ.
All right, can you hear me?
I can.
All right.
Thank you. It's getting lonely in here.
10 minutes of the talk, but I think I caught everything else.
Oh, you missed the last 10 minutes. Yeah, well, we didn't really get into my views terribly deep. It was more of he was pressing me on where I start, and then but that really wasn't. I don't think that's where we want what we wanted to talk about. What we wanted to talk about was where I end. Where I start isn't terribly interesting.
Yeah, well, I'd say the internet consensus is that you got wrecked, so you have to hang your head in shame and come back another time.
That's why I asked for about we're going to meet again in a month, and I think that'll give me time to prepare for him next time. I didn't make any points with respect to the contradictions at all.
No, I think I mean the trouble I have the same trouble with Trey that everybody does. It's hard to follow what he's talking about because he doesn't use the same terminology. He uses the terminology of the Greeks, and that's it. And so he's jumping around a lot, but I think you nailed him on the contradiction between sort of an unchanging God acting to create or things like that, or and then he said a lot of weird stuff. Like he said God can't predicate, and I didn't know what he meant by that.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I wasn't.
Because I've never heard him say that before.
Right. I think that's partially the God can't learn anything new. I think that's what Trey is actually saying there. It's more of that if it were the case that God were to create and go and have it be true that he created and have that be a change in his awareness, then he's learned something new, right? And that I think is what he means. He can't predicate. He's not. God isn't able to form propositions essentially. Of states of affairs, like say, and so I think that's what he's saying there. And in terms of a lot of the Trey speak, I actually think Butt's got it right in that ultimately, even when he talks about his sense perception and LNC that he insists on at the start, that's essentially Parmenides and Heraclitus, right?
Yeah.
The Parmenides is the LNC, and the Heraclitus is the sense perception, right? The changing and the and the no change, right? And so all of these terms he's using, actual and potential, all of them basically, and happening and not happening, and all that stuff just boils down to this contradiction that's entailed that is entailed between Heraclitus and Parmenides. And Trey wants to say he's got a solution to, but it's blatant special pleading. He's essentially what I'm saying, which is, well, the universe itself as a set is a brute fact. He's saying God is a brute fact. The universe itself is a brute fact, and within it there are these caused effects, and so you have the one and the many. But the thing is I don't hang a lot of hooks on that, right? Like I don't have a lot riding on that. Things could be otherwise, and I'm not. I am willing I'm willing to place very little stock on that belief that I have, whereas Trey is putting all his chips on it, right? On the fact that he has a contradiction he can't explain, but he's going to make appeal to analogy, and go out. Like I'm not going out arguing that people should believe in the infinite regress of caused effects.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's the. I can't remember if you pressed him on this, but one of the problems with this analogical language argument is effectively you have to concede that there's no actual way in which you could know these properties of God. If you only know them analogically, then you have no real contact with these supposed qualities, right? And so you're just, I don't know. Although, truth be told, I'm kind of like, if I were a Christian, I think I'd be sympathetic to this idea that we can't, well, I don't want to say you can't predicate about God, but you can't, I don't know, reliably, use the English language to make, true statements about God's nature and whatnot. Because if it's true that God is transcendent, then, right, your language is automatically going to limit how well you can describe things like that.
What I think I would end up doing is I would say I would be a Thomist, but I would bite down on the notion that all states are necessary, that God's nature determines, and there is no, by virtue of his nature not being otherwise. Like, I don't understand. I was talking to Ozzy about this. I don't understand the Christians who want to give God choices that aren't determined by his nature, because he has you want him to have the nature he has because that's what qualifies him as God.
Mm-hmm.
And you want states of affairs to come forward from that. Why would you have a problem saying that his own nature determines his acts, right? And the thing I really like, what I like about Thomism, is I like the concept of diffusion. I like this notion that our perception of God is the attenuation of the light through the crystal. Like, we perceive red and blue and green, but it's white light that's actually through diffusion. And the diffusion is, in the Christian conception, is our own sin and distance from God, right? And so there's a or I guess Trey would probably say that, well, I think anybody would say that Adam, or even beings who are without sin, have a diffused, they can't partake in being, right?
Yeah.
But I like the prop that God is divinely simple, and that his properties are the diffusion of that. But I don't know how God acts to bring about states of affairs without change, unless you just say the whole thing's a block, which at that point then we are, as well, I mean, the entire universe is necessary. Everything, all of it's all necessary. And then, and I don't think that God becomes more, God does, I do think there's something to the argument that God just becomes a force, essentially. God is like the match that brings about the flame, right? Like, it is just doing what it's doing, and there's no merit or anything. It's not like it's a by virtue of something. It's just that things are just the way they are. It's just like the whole entire kit and caboodle is just a brute fact.
Yeah, that's like the Spinozan view, right? It's like God is this sort of pantheistic force that just drives nature, but I don't know.
Did Trey ever say that his God is a person? I mean, it sounds like it's not.
Well, it's a person by analogy, and by that, there's no point of like God can't have thoughts. God can't have intentions.
That doesn't sound like a person to me.
Yeah, I don't know what. Well, that's why I think William Lane Craig objects on the notion, on the not just on this notion, but on this point, but that I think traditionally divine simplicity has been rejected by some because of that God just reducing to a force. So, Fox, I messaged you the thing, and I missed the beard, Nate Brody.
I always argue with Trey that his God is not the God of the Bible. God of the Bible is a person. He has desires. He has wants. He repents. He gets angry. He'll say it's all analogical language, but for an analogy to work, there has to be some sort of commonality between the object and what you're trying to describe as an analogy. And I don't really see him offering that, but the Bible God does change his mind and has regrets and so forth. And where Trey's God is just kind of like, it's a force is the best way to describe it. It's a force that's all output, no input. And it's just spewing out acts, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I think when you get, and we pressed Trey on this before in past hangouts, is on the nature of Jesus becoming man. It's not just that God. It's not only that this creation came about, but it's God's participating in it. Which if you were to take the way that Trey articulated it, I tend to think of it. I've referred to it a couple of times now that Jimmy Stevens had that analogy of God as the author of a book, and basically all of what we experience is the novel, and that's why there is no new knowledge for God, essentially that the novel would have to exist for all, have existed for all time. There's no time in which the novel was written, but that would be the God participating, would be by virtue of his participating through a character. But it seems like the Christians want to say more than that. God isn't just animating a puppet, but that he is, or an avatar. I got into a conversation with a preceptor about that. I think that was that. But anyway, in any case, the God is not just animating an avatar, but that is God. That is the God is, that's the power of the redemption and the Christ's death, is that's the it's not simply by virtue of Jesus being sinless, but that it's God giving himself essentially for mankind to pay the debt to himself. And then he raises himself.
Yeah, he lowers himself to become flesh, and all this stuff. I don't know. It's I think Trey has too many attributes to juggle for his God, and then of course he doesn't have any attributes at all either. So
Yeah, to claim he has attributes is to predicate about him.
Yeah.
In some way.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is Trey wants to say a lot about his God, right?
Yeah.
I
mean, a lot of those things are in themselves like predications. I mean,
right.
you don't just predicates aren't simply ascribing certain qualities to a being, but they could also be negating some qualities. So
you can't. What Trey wants to do is be able to say something about God, and then you question him on the entailment of it, and he says we can't talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Like what's entailed by God? What's entailed by God acting? Well, I don't know. I don't know what's entailed by it, but he did. I know he did. And it ends up just being kind of crying about the problem, in my opinion. It's like, look, it has to be this way because the consequences otherwise are, and that's where he gets into, well, how are you going to deal with the consequences of the contradiction? I'm biting down hard on the contradiction. How are you going to deal with it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as if this is, and that's, Trey will say that to people. He will say, what's your account? You don't have an account? Well, I at least have one, right? Like that's as if it's the, I've seen him do that. He hasn't done it recently, but I used to see him do that a lot, where his challenge to people was, how do you account for these things? And if you don't offer one, well, I have one, you don't. I think I have that in a video, I remember now, with Camille, I think. And that actually was related to free will and culpability. It was kind of like, well, how do you account for us, being culpable then, right? Like the consequences.
The same way we lock up a dangerous chemical or a gun, we lock up dangerous people.
Right. It's I think I said in that video on determinism, is that the punishment is the deterrence. It's a cause. It's another cause, right? In the matrix, right? Of factors that go into things that determine things. So it's efficacious. And I actually think what's funny about free will is that if it's the case that it's not determined by states, what would be our rationale for punishing anyone, right? Like there's no, you're not causing anything. They could just simply will to do otherwise the next time, right? Like,
yeah, it's
a really, really funny problem. I don't know what the argument is. The argument is, well, you're not culpable for your actions then. And my response is, you've taken determination out of it entirely, right? Like how, if it's arbitrary, what are you doing? Right?
Yeah, free will doesn't have any explanation of why we act. Why did we choose A over B? It was, is it just random? I mean, there has to be some reason.
Well, that's the thing, right? We offer even reasons, right? Like I think in the start of that video, I talk about us getting kind of swindled by this girl at the Seattle airport, who came up and offered this story to us, and by which we then gave her $20, right? We pulled out $20 and gave it to her because it was a really convincing story about how she had, lost her baggage and all this other stuff. And then we get back and found out that on Reddit that she had been doing that quite a bit. And that we'd been suckered. And she was leveraging all of these things that would cause us to give her $20, right? So I think our fact that we offer reasons and that we offer rationales kind of undermines that thought that we're not determined by these things in some way.
Yeah, well, not only that, but how well do you even understand your own reasons for acting? I mean, I think most of our reasoning is just sort of post hoc articulations of something. I mean, a lot of times you act without knowing, especially if you're put in unusual circumstances. People just, they do things that surprise themselves. And how else is that possible if you're not sort of just acting subconsciously and then justifying it later?
Yeah. You're kind of guessing as to what it's not unlike justification in general, where it's a kind of offering a post hoc rationale by which you think you came to know something to be the case. You're kind of rendering the account. It may or may not be.
Yeah, I'm kind of I'm impressed that you decided to take up sort of the social constructivist viewpoint against Trey, because I figured that would just get ridiculed. And not that it's a stupid view, but that he would just dismiss it immediately. Like, what, you mean you just make up words and your friends use them and that's it? But
I think
so. I'd be interested to see where that goes in the next hangout, because that's
yeah. I
mean, everybody. I think just about everybody's a social constructivist on some level, right? It's just, but it's a really hard problem to justify how it is your language maps to the world, like how you actually refer to things. And because you're not an idealist, you're not just saying that everything is just words, right? You want to say that there are things outside of language. It's just language is your best attempt at communicating that reality.
Yeah, the language is a way of representing it, right? And the thing is, I think it ties to the social. Like, you can't lose the human activity aspect of it. And actually, I was going to use an example with Trey was, because language games are really persuasive to me. It's about this knowing the context that you're in. We then invoke words with all of these assumptions built in, right? Like I know the context based on other information and things, and so my words are dynamic in terms of their meaning in relation to what. Like I'm kind of playing. I'm playing a card essentially, knowing what it is that's going to cause in you, and looking to see if that's what that does, right? And it's Trey had said, what was the example? Oh, he he used the example of the dog, that the dog's a good dog, and the neighbor's son is a good son, right? But that the use of the word "good" there, and that's a perfect example of a language game, right? Of two different contexts where you're assuming the knowledge of the other person, and so the meaning is dynamic, right? The concept is dynamic because the concept of good in both of those cases is different. But that's predicated on me having all of these assumptions about your demeanor and about your,
Yeah, Wittgenstein gives the example of like the word march, and like whether it refers to a month or whether it refers to the act of walking in a structured way, whatnot. And whenever you use that word, you don't have to append some kind of explanation of it. People just know immediately which one you're talking about. It's kind of the case with homonyms generally.
Yeah, well, but I think that the use in context of a social activity in the language games, though, kind of that is how the mapping works, right? It's not our meanings relate to the subjects using them, not the objects themselves to which they refer. Mm-hmm. It has to do with the human activity and the the use in relation to each other, right? Like, we're setting up those expectations, and and then and we're committing, or we're manipulating the language by which to like deceive each other, right? Like,
it's the perlocutionary content that really gives you the meaning almost, or gives you some pseudo meaning or whatever you want to. I don't know. I mean that's
how the mapping works, though, right?
Yeah.
It's not the positivist account, right? It's not the it's not the picture theory, right?
Yeah.
I gotta take off, so thanks for the invite, Bert.
See you, Floyd. Nice seeing you.
Right. Bye.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend I have that really nailed down, because that's a really thorny issue for me. I mean, I accept the basic premises of that kind of social constructivism, but it's really hard to justify how you build any kind of ontology out of it. You don't want to be an idealist, because intuitively, idealism just sounds stupid, but it's also a really hard position to argue against.
What, against idealism?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I guess it's I don't I don't know. I feel like I need to. That's why I want to write. I want to do some writing and actually try to solidify, because I'm so terrible talking off the cuff about it. But it's really hard. I was on a streetcar with Ozzy, and there was one point where I went on for about 5 minutes, and about a minute into it, he said something like, "I'm not following." And then I got lost in the weeds. And at the end of it, I just was apologizing. I was just like, I have no clue what the hell I'm talking about. Like, I'd wound myself up. I haven't seen that happen to me in a long time. But it was this really weird situation where I had wandered in and completely lost track of the breadcrumbs and how to get back out and to the point I was making. And I was just rambling. So I'm at risk of doing that when I start talking about this, but it seems to me that idealism wants to say that these conceptual objects are
they want to say the objects themselves are like conceptual, or they're just
right.
They're concepts in the mind of God, and well, I don't know. I guess an idealist doesn't necessarily have to be a theist, but
I think what it was, and one thing I didn't get into, I think that if you had other means of sense perception, the world would conceptually take a very different form, right? Like if we didn't have senses of touch, let's say touch and sight, but we had really sensitive smell, well, it would be hard to not have touch. I don't know how you navigate the world without touch, but let's say we had really heightened, or like if you take something like bats, it's a little like your notions of reality, like what constitutes the objects, would be radically different. It would seem to me. We don't have terms for like a broad range of smells like we usually. Or somebody said Nagel's What It Means to Be a Bat, or Wittgenstein's would a lion say things that made sense. It seems to me like your conceptual framework would be very different, which is why I'm persuaded that it's that these are functions of representation. They're strictly linguistic, and not they are referring to things, but they are referring to the use. I'm just beating a drum at this point.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think they would probably just respond that you're sort of begging the question a bit and saying that there is this kind of sense perception that's interpreting the world in the first place, and that really what you're doing is just defining relations between these perceptions, and it's the relation. I mean, Butt said in the chat, but it's the relations between the objects is really what you're ontologically committed to, rather than the objects themselves or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, that's why it'll help to write it out a bit more. I did it actually. It was good that Trey kind of questioned me about metaphysics a couple of weeks ago, because it kind of really forced me to think about it again. I think, gosh, I think that my problem with Trey's notion of skipping 20th century philosophy, right? Like, how do you make sense without the linguistic turn, right? Like, how do you, without analyzing language, like, that's where metaphysics is like completely wrong, in my opinion, or not metaphysics, but as if metaphysics is wrong, but but where they're getting confused, right? Where the where the pre-Socratics and classical failed is in its not roping in language and analysis of language.
Yeah. Well, I guess that explains his resistance to it, is that he dismissed everything that came after like 1500.
Yeah.
Or maybe even before that.
Well, he thinks that what it becomes. I think what it becomes is, it becomes this like that we're thinking too hard about the problems, or we're like giving ourselves excuses. Like, that's how he kind of treats 20th century philosophy, and this,
yeah, it has this like materialist motivation to deny God and whatnot, and out of that is born all of these
and it's like
bizarre contradictions of quantum mechanics and whatever.
Right, or that it's doing it by means of like some semantic trickery, right? That that misses the problem, but instead it's like that it's the ink spray, essentially, right? And wow, I mean, it's just so wrong. Like,
his history of philosophy is pretty funny. I enjoyed that intro. It's like, Butt said in the chat, it's like, next time he asks you a question, you just respond with your own history of philosophy for a good like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'll ask him next time what his kind of. I'm curious what his. He's obviously taking in a lot of information. I imagine it's that he listens to a lot of stuff while he's working. That's what I do when I paint or whatever. I'm listening to lectures. Like, I can't, if I'm coding, I can't listen to anything. But when I'm working in CG, doing some creative aspect of it, I'm listening to lectures or other things, and I kind of go into almost like a blind sight thing where I've got two modes going on. I've got kind of something I'm aware of that I'm focusing on as the lecture, and then I'm just kind of letting my creative process go. And I don't have to really think about that. I'm just I'm making choices and not really aware of the choices I'm making. And so I think that he does that. As a consequence, I don't know that I suspect he's not like reading a lot. He's not. He says that although he enjoys this stuff, he may not enjoy studying that way. And I don't have a problem with that per se, right? Like, because that's how I get at a lot of the history of philosophy as well. Is I don't go back and read Aristotle. I read summaries of Aristotle, right? Okay, and I have gone back. Like, I am a little. I should ask Trey if he's read the Summa, right? Because Trey last time I talked to him hadn't read the Summa, right? He had read commentaries on the Summa, but never actually read the Summa itself, right? And to hold to Thomas Aquinas and call yourself a Thomist and not giving that a go, right? Or to invoke the pre-Socratics so much without actually having read Parmenides, not through Plato or whatever.
Yeah. Although the pre-Socratics, I don't even know how much of their writing has survived. Like, I know Heraclitus, only exists in fragments.
Yeah.
So I don't know about people before that. Yeah, I don't. I certainly don't disparage his, being an autodidact. I guess like I kind of hate that typical objection that a lot of people use. It's like, well, this isn't how you do philosophy in a university, or like a philosophy professor would just laugh at all of your ideas because it's just an elitist. It's not even a rebuttal, but it seems like it's very common.
Can you repeat that one more time?
I was saying, you know, I don't begrudge him as an autodidact or anything like that, or doing things, you know, ahistorically, because a lot of times people respond to Trey or people like him by saying, you know, this isn't how you do philosophy at a university. Or this isn't the proper way of doing it, which isn't even, you know, it's not a rebuttal.
Right. And
It's just it's authority worship, but it's very common for people to do that. Like, rather
right, and that's where I'm not. Well, number one is I'm not in a terribly better spot to correct Trey on these things, because I am certain that some of my own notions of the pre-Socratics or of classical philosophy or who is saying what, I have broad notions, but I'm not about to correct Trey. And the thing is, it doesn't matter. Like, even his, like, ultimately what Trey wants to say is there's this seeming contradiction and you need to explain it, right? Like, that, it just boils down to that. And that very long story was the history of how that's been bantered about and battled around. I just want to get to the point of, like, what is the
So I was just thinking somebody should do like an animated sketch of that explanation from Trey. Just do like a quick little video, the history of philosophy according to Trey in animated form.
like
Yeah.
these things popping in and
Right.
out of
Like, and then Plato said this, and you draw Plato and cross it out. It's like, oh, sorry, it was Socrates, and then it was this guy.
That would be hilarious. I told Ozzy that I wanted to do that with his the speech acts rendition he did for Helena, because he's using all of these examples, you know, of and they're pretty colorful, and they would make for this great, like, kind of flashy animation of just like just comically bouncing between these examples. You know, the ship ceremony and the wedding and the, you know, all the topics. So
did you this wasn't in the hangout, I think it was in a thread, but he said he was an extreme realist or something like with Susan Hakey, or however you say her name. He said that he was an extreme realist, but then in the next sentence said that he believed that all ideas were in the mind of God. I didn't know what he meant by that.
Well, he juxtaposed it against was it Aristotle, or I think it was juxtaposed against Aristotle. Let me find that thread, because he said I made sense of that from his follow-up comment. All right. Well, it's going to take me a second.
So for a second, I thought he was like talking about like Platonic forms when he said ideals instead of ideas. Like, maybe he meant like forms are, you know, these objects in the mind of God, and I don't know, but that whole line confused me, because it really did sound like he was just contradicting himself in subsequent sentences.
Sorry, sorry. Okay, I found it. I've had like a bunch of activity now as a result of this video, and so this got buried. Yeah, he said, let's see, extreme. But suggested. Oh yeah, so Susan Hay had asked, what would be the distinction between a realist and extreme realist? And he said Aristotle and Thomas Aristotle and Thomas were moderate realists, where universals are categories of the mind and they inhere in the thing itself. So that doesn't that's Trey communicating by means of negativa, saying what is not an extreme realist.
Yeah.
So if they were moderates, if Thomas is a moderate, so it would seem like you would think that Sproul would be an extreme realist. if Thomas and Aristotle were moderate realists. He said, and so Butt said, right, so Trey's a Platonist after pretending to be an Aristotelian forever, like I've said 100 times before. So he has to drop all this stuff about act and potency and always just meant being and becoming. Right. So he's right. Because I think what it is, the distinction would be that the prior, it's not this potency kind of bringing about states. It's the stream of becoming from these forms that are that exist outside of the things, it would seem. But let's see. But says, yeah, saying ideals exist in the mind of God is saying you're a middle Platonist. There's no way around that. So
Yeah.
Anyway, that was fun. That was
Yeah.
nice chat.
It's fun to just talk shit in the side chat while that was going on, at least, and mock everyone mercilessly. Yeah. All right. So, when did you say when you were doing the next one?
Probably gonna be about a month because my wife's coming into town, and I want to take advantage of the 3 weeks that she's here to do that, to be with her. And then he said he's got a couple busy couple weeks, so maybe I'll like prick him in about 2 weeks. I'll like make a video about him ridiculing some aspects so we can fire fire things up. Oh, maybe I'll make one off of this.
Yeah. Yeah, if I had any animating skills, I would definitely animate those first like 10 minutes or whatever it was.
Shit thing is, I've got my PC here, and my Mac back in LA has all of the software on it. So, so I either, they're all that stuff's there. So the videos I've been editing have been in like this whatever Windows 10 photo editor is.
Yeah.
So that's why they're raw and horrible. And I'm not I'm terrible reading like teleprompter style. And so doing actually like a clean 10-minute take of a rant or whatever, I never get it. That's why my other videos are so chopped up, is that it would take me forever to try to get a clean take. My first couple of videos, I tried doing that, and I really didn't like the process. But now editing's a problem. So it's probably gonna have to be a little more forgiving. So
yeah, the same issue once upon a time when I tried to do, I think it was like a book review channel, and I got one video into that and realized I was terrible at it. It was really hard, and so I just gave up. But it is awkward just talking by yourself into a camera. It's very difficult to be organized. And I'm amazed. There's some people that are really good at it. And I don't know how they do it. But
wait, you dropped out there at the end. What did you say? You're amazed?
I said there are some people that are really good at just rants into the camera, like they can stay on topic and it's succinct.
Like Scott,
not me.
Scott Clifton, obviously with his acting skills and his ability to memorize, or have the lines. Like he's reading from those things, right? Like he writes first and then he reads them, but it looks like he's talking right to the camera, not reading any of it. It's really funny. Whereas Ozzy's just horrible at it. I mean, Jesus, I have to drink about 3 cups of coffee, and even then I fall asleep about twice before the videos. I'm just joking.
Gary Edwards is the worst. You have to watch the video 15 times to understand one slide.
That's true. Yeah. It's too bad too, because I like Gary Edwards a lot. But yeah, I was just watching that Quine discussion we had again recently, and that was a really good hangout. It was funny to watch it now and realize, actually, even though I've been away from things for a bit, I understand things a lot better than I did then. So it's good.
God,
it's nice getting into these topics. What's that?
So that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a couple of years.
Yeah.
Helena wanted to do I'm hoping Helena comes back because we were going to do the meaning skepticism thing, which would fold really nicely into all this current topic that we're in. And you and I, I had the intention of doing the philosophical investigation, so that's why I got kind of sidetracked by Trey.
I was kind of hoping you would hold off on it for a little bit because I didn't want to go back into that book just yet.
Yeah,
it's a tough read.
It is. There's a guy that there's a guy who uploaded a video, a reading of it. He does actually a really nice reading of it on YouTube. So I think listening to it is by someone who's familiar with it is better than my reading it. Like
that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I was able to kind of go through portions of it a couple of times and really absorb the meaning. So that's pretty good.
All right. Yeah, well, I'm gonna head out.
Thanks for dropping in.
Yeah, it was a fun little hangout to watch.
Ozzy just heard the bit about it. Kind of things am I listening to? Somebody's asking, oh, you know what? People should watch. There's an interview with John Searle. I think it's called The Philosophy of Wittgenstein or Philosophy of Language.
Yeah.
It's that couch interview.
Yeah. What's the guy's name? I don't remember his name.
It's that guy that had that show.
That's the British guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great show. It was like on in the 80s. But there's Sealing Spirits. You should check out the Philosophy of Language with John Searle. It's if you see two guys sitting on a couch in tacky clothing, that's the
and like VHS quality. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. But that I re-listened to that about a week ago or something, and there was a nice with McGee. That's right. Ozzy said McGee was the guy. But that's a great show, and McGee's show in general was great. I also just watched because I knew I was going to be talking to Trey. I watched the one on Aristotle with a woman.
God damn it! I should know her name because I have 3 of her books. Martha Nussbaum. That's what it is.
Yeah. She's great, and anyway, the one with Searle, I went back and listened. I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually is it's a lot richer than it was on the surface for me. I think like after I've taken in a bunch of these positions, then when I listened to it, I was like, holy shit, was that in there the whole time? And it's just because I think it's deceptively easy to listen to. And so he's going through Wittgensteinian concepts, but he's just giving a line or two to them. But within those lines, the things he's implying, you don't get right away. Like you have to be familiar with the material to kind of pick up the things that he's saying. So anyway, I really like that video a lot. Philosophy Overdose is a really great channel, and I'll watch anything that uploads to that. And I've basically been trying to do with a slight diversion into talking about agnosticism and doing videos on that in response to Nate and Heretic. What I was trying to do is I've been trying to devote a little more time to philosophy of language and speech acts and kind of get my head wrapped around. I'd like to do I've said it forever, but I'd like to do kind of a video on my notions of moral realism, and because the videos help me to kind of figure out what it is I think about things. They're great. Kind of doing the writing for them is a really great process. I discover a lot about my views that way. And then like actually this talk with Trey about metaphysics, I was coming to realizations that I didn't realize that I had taken on board the consequences of my notions, and then was finally was expressing them and going, oh wow, do I actually think? Oh wow, I think that. That's really I was kind of surprising myself at like what. Oh yeah, I guess I kind of think that. And it was implied or it was entailed by my other beliefs. And if you'd probably quizzed me on it, I probably would have rendered that. but it was not something I had like explicitly said to myself, which was kind of an interesting phenomena or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right.
Well,
I'll catch you later.
Yeah.
Get some stuff done today, but yeah, that was definitely fun. Hope you do it again.
Yeah, we'll do it again, and then I'll do it again in about a month, and then also let's. I would like eventually just talk about meaning skepticism and even Wittgenstein and that Burgess chapter on Kripke.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that sometime, or talk about philosophical investigations. Although that's pretty giant. So
Yeah.
Talk about out of our depths.
Yeah, well, that's why if you do that, you got to get somebody other than me and then hang out. Otherwise,
we sound like Trey giving us history.
Right.
All right.
I'll see you later.
Good talking to you, TJ. See ya. All right, and thank you, audience, and you guys cracked me up. I'm gonna go back and read through, and if you guys have questions or anything, or you want to interrogate my view, you can. I will respond to comments. So, and enjoy doing so. So, cheers, and we'll do this again in about a month. Thanks to Trey again for being a good sport and having a conversation. That was a lot of fun. So, have a good afternoon.